Excellent. I'm not a super techie, obviously. I'm just always glad when the technology works. Okay, so I believe Doc Antle was raided a few months ago. His place was raided. Is there
Actually, I
any?
think that was August of 2020 that he was raided in connection to a situation that was going on at another facility. And I think what the authorities were trying to do was to determine where some lion cubs had ended up, and they had ended up with Antle. And then I don't know if it was, I'm pretty sure it was connected to that raid, but I don't know that absolutely for sure, that the Department of Justice then has indicted Antle, and they had a hearing in, I think it was July of this year, and at the hearing they just said we need more time, and so it was postponed, and I don't know when the next hearing is set because I'm not a party in those suits, so I don't get notification.
So is his facility currently shut down and the animals are, oh,
No,
he's
it's
still,
still operating.
oh, I was gonna ask what happened to the animals. So what happened to all of Joe Exotic's animals? Did Jeff and Lauren get them all?
Yeah, the lawsuit that I had against Joe, the animals were not considered assets because, you know, tigers cost $15,000 or $10,000 a year to feed and provide vet care for. So that's not an asset, that's a liability.
Right.
So in the course of the lawsuit, we didn't get awarded the animals, but we were hoping that what would happen is that he would at least stop breeding and, you know, just run a regular zoo if he was going to do that. And the best option we thought would be if he would actually place the animals in sanctuaries, but he wasn't willing to do that. He ended up in jail. His partner, Jeff Lowe, then inherited all of the animals and started moving them about an hour south to a place called Thackerville. The GW Zoo is in Wynnewood, Oklahoma, and Thackerville is about an hour south. It's really close to the Texas border. So he had started building a place there that he called Tiger King Park, I think maybe to capitalize on Tiger King's popularity, and was building cages and moving cats. And the lawsuit that we've had against Joe since 2011, the judge finally issued an order saying that we were entitled to receive the zoo. And the reason that that had taken so long was because Joe had, as soon as we sued him, he put the zoo in his mother's name. And then his mother came in finally at the end and said, you know, this was a fraudulent transfer. He just did this to hide this from Big Cat Rescue so they couldn't take the zoo. And so she admitted to that, and the judge said, okay, fine, then the zoo should go to Big Cat Rescue. And the judge gave Jeff Lowe, I think 180 days to relocate the rest of the animals to the place that he was building in Thackerville, since we weren't entitled to the animals. Once Jeff did that, he was also sued by, I don't even know how many people have lawsuits going against them, but I think the Department of Justice and maybe PETA and USDA. So Jeff Lowe ended up giving up his USDA license in August of 2020. And without a USDA license, it wouldn't be legal for him to exhibit animals. And then part of the other lawsuits were that these cubs were in such bad shape because they weren't getting proper nutrition because they've been taken away from their moms so early, that the judge went in and issued an order saying that all of the cubs and their mothers should be seized from the Lowe's. And so I forget how many cats that was, 20 or so, that last year they were able to seize and put into legitimate sanctuaries. And then they decided that the conditions there were so bad in the end that they ended up going in and getting the last 68 cats out of there, or 68 animals out of there in July or August of this year. So the GW Zoo has been closed since October of 2020. The Thackerville Zoo shouldn't have any animals on it as of last month or so. And where a lot of those animals are is still a mystery to everyone, and we're trying to figure out where an awful lot of the cats went. We're looking for the cats, but a lot of animals disappeared apparently from Jeff Lowe, and we're trying to figure out where those animals ended up. Did they get killed? Did he send them to other wretched facilities? What happened to them? We just don't know that yet.
Well, that leads me to my next question. What kind of person wants a tiger as a pet? they're not little cats, you know, but I wonder why somebody would want a chimpanzee or a baboon. And I remember growing up, all the movies, the black and white movies, like from Italy, where there'd be like a guy with a grinder thing and a little monkey. And I'm sure that contributed to people going, oh, I have a little, you know, little monkey. But I see on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, people having the fennec fox. And then there's a whole big thing in Oman. A lot of the sheikhs, they walk the tigers and the leopards and all those pets. So I know that contributes to it. But can you shed any light on what kind of person would look at that and go, that seems like a good idea to me. I will go buy myself a cub and keep it, you know, as if they don't realize it's going to, you know, become a massive animal.
Yeah, well, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the last thing that you said, because people who live around tigers, they don't have tigers as pets. People who live around lions, they don't have lions as pets because they know what those cats are like. They know how big they are. But when we see them in a zoo, we're usually across a moat so far away that they look like maybe a big dog size, and people seem to think they would be able to handle that. And when they get them from these people that are pimping out cubs for, you know, pay to play and photo ops and stuff like that, the cubs are pretty small at that point, but they can be 150, 200 pounds by the time they're 1.5 to 2 years old. And by the time they're 3 or 4, they could be 500 pounds. So that's when people have that come to Jesus moment, when they realize what they've gotten into and can't get rid of the cats fast enough. But as far as what kind of person does that, I think it's about ego and control, especially when you have these people that have these huge backyard collections of tigers, I think, or lions. I think what they're trying to prove is that they're special in some way. And usually if you look at those people, they're people that are not very well educated. They don't have anything else going on in their lives. They couldn't attract a mate if their life depended on it, you know, based on their own skills or their own appearance, their own ability to earn an income. And yet, if they have tigers, they can attract all of those things into their life that they want by using the tigers as bait and using the babies as bait. So I think it's a way of showing dominance over animals. And frequently you will see kind of cult-like situations in those organizations where the people are treated the same way. They're very controlled as far as what they can eat, what they can wear, where they can go, who they can talk to, whether or not they can have a social media presence. All of those things are limited by the cult leaders.
Well, that was brought out in Tiger King with both Joe Exotic, who I think at the time had over 200 big cats. I mean, where did he get the money? Because he didn't seem like a wealthy man. Where would he get all that money? I mean, as you're watching Tiger King, you see the people that work there, and then you see the people that work, you know, for Jeff Lowe and Lauren and all of them, and they're clearly not billionaires. They don't have a lot of land. They don't seem to have a whole lot of business sense. I mean, they're kind of sleazy business people, but not like good business people. So where would they get the hundreds of thousands of dollars it would take to properly care for these animals, assuming that you weren't offended by what they were doing to begin with? But I'm just like, when they brought out the thing about the Walmart meat, I'm assuming, I hate to say it, but I'm assuming that's like meat that's already gone bad. And then the way they dumped it out, it looked like it didn't look like it came from a freezer. And then they dumped it into a truck. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you're not even supposed to defrost. You know, when you take meat out of a freezer, you're not supposed to defrost it on the counter. It's supposed to be in the refrigerator. And this meat looked like it had been out a long time. And then they said that Joe, like almost like a good thing, allowed them to have like first pick of the meat. And I'm thinking, okay, is anyone stopping this? I mean, even if you don't care about the tigers, do you see what is going on here, kind of thing? So would you say that's kind of like a common thread when you find these like roadside zoos and these people with these big menageries, that whole situation?
Yeah, you lit on a number of things there. So Joe had said that it only cost him $375,000 a year, I think, to run his zoo. And even though he claimed to have as many as 400 tigers at some points, he said that he had 1,400 animals on the park. And so 1,400 animals on 14 acres, that's 100 animals per acre, which is a ridiculously high number of animals. And there were a lot of places on that 14 acres that were like ponds and stuff that you couldn't even put an animal. But $375,000 is not nearly enough money to take care of that many animals, because to take care of proper food and vet care, just the food and vet care, not the overhead cost of the sanctuary, per lion or per tiger, any sanctuary will tell you, any legitimate sanctuary will tell you that it costs about $10,000 per year per cat. So you can divide 375,000 by 10,000 and you get like what, 30 animals that he could take care of. So I don't think they were getting proper vet care or proper food by any means. And the Walmart diet is something where I'm sure what Walmart intended when they started this program was they have to throw away so much meat because it goes bad.
Right.
And once it goes bad, what they do is they have these big blue barrels and they take the meat and they just throw it in the barrel. And it may be in a refrigerator, but it's already been through the freezing process. It's been defrosted to be out on the display counter, because when you buy meat, it's not usually frozen solid. And then it's gone into this barrel. And then it sits in that barrel for who knows how long before one of these places that they donate to comes in with a big truck and picks up all those barrels. And then you saw what they do once they get back to facilities. And so one of the things that we have really hammered on Walmart about is the fact that they are enabling these backyard breeders to constantly be breeding more cubs than what they could ever feed, because they're getting free food. And Joe had said, I think it was in his trial, and I think he said in other places online, that he could make $100,000 off of each cub just for photo props. So for about 4 to 6 weeks, between the ages of about 8 weeks to 12 weeks is when it's legal to use cubs for that. So during that period of time, if they make $100,000 per cub, they can make an awful lot of money from that. But then that cub could live, we had a tiger that just died at the age of 25. And we've had a number of cats live into their 20s. So they could live 20 more years at that ridiculously high, expensive cost of caring for them. And there's no way that those kinds of facilities that are breeding and exploiting cats can possibly stay afloat forever, because they're going to just collapse under the burden of all of the adult cats. I think that's why an awful lot of the adult cats go missing. And my suspicion is that they end up in the illegal trade for their parts, their bones, their teeth, their hides, because the kind of person who would rip a cub away from their mother is probably the kind of person that would sell the cat to anybody for, you know, not caring what's going to happen to them once they leave the facility. We had contacted Walmart, I can't even tell you how many times over the years, not only because of Joe, but because so many of these places do this, where they feed the cats the diet, which we can't do anything about. It's not illegal for them to do that, but they feed their derelict staff this expired meat, which Walmart makes it very clear that you are not allowed to provide any of that for human consumption after they hand it off to a sanctuary for food.
I saw the packages of bologna. I was like, oh no, what's going on? And the staff seemed excited. They were like, yeah, Joe, let's just have first dibs. I'm like, you should be like in a hazmat outfit, you know, you shouldn't even be touching that. And then my next thought was, oh my gosh, the poor animals. But then you look in the condition. So I wanted to ask you about in the wild, about how long would a tiger cub normally nurse and stay with their mom?
Before we go there, another point that you made was they took it out of one truck and put it in another truck.
Right.
The reason that they did that was because they didn't even have coolers or freezers at the GW Zoo that were working to be able to put the stuff in. So they had a truck with a freezer box on the back, which meant you had to have the gas running all the time for the freezer to work. And by the time we took over the GW Zoo, that thing had been broken down for who knows how long. So there wasn't any refrigeration or freezing that was enabled after they got the food to the park for who knows how long.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
As far as cubs in the wild, usually a mother tiger or mother lion will have cubs maybe once every 2 or 3 years, because she's raising her cubs during that period of time in between and teaching them everything they need to know about being who they're going to be before they get big enough to go out and establish their own territory. So for a cat that can have babies, literally can have babies every 68 days, that's what happens in these backyard zoos. They are leaving the males and females together, like you saw in Tiger King. And as soon as those babies are born, they're pulling them out so that she can be bred right back again. And they just breed them literally to death.
Now, you said it was legal to take a cub between 8 weeks and 12 weeks for a photo op?
Yeah, unfortunately, USDA makes that possible by I think it's a mistake, and we've been trying since, gosh, at least since 2010, and maybe before that, to get them to fix their rule. But they have a ruling that says that you're not supposed to take the cubs away from their mothers until they're like old enough to be weaned, which could be at 8 weeks. I mean, you can physically wean a cat at 8 weeks. And so by having that kind of language, that's where it establishes the lower end of the scale. And then on the other end of the scale, they said you can't allow contact between the public and a cub once it's a juvenile. And a juvenile is not defined by any particular weight. And so it's been estimated to be between 12 and 16 weeks. So that means they're saying you can't have them under 8 weeks, you can't have them over 12 to 16 weeks. So that creates this 8 to 16 week period, 8 week to 16 week. So a 4 week or 6 week period that they can actually use those animals. And they need to just close that gap. I mean, that's what our federal bill does. It just says you can't cut them anytime, and that'll put an end to it.
So the USDA actually has jurisdiction that overrides the Endangered Species Act, which I know has been weakened over the years, but supposedly the landmark bill was supposed to kind of prevent this, or at least have strong guidelines, enforcement, oversight. So there's nothing in the ESA that could say it's an endangered species.
There is now, but that didn't happen until 2016.
Oh.
So that was part of what sent Joe to jail, because the rules did change in 2016 and he didn't change what he was doing. So I think it was 1983 or 1984, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service saw that there were so many people that were inbreeding tigers in order to get white tigers, because that became such a fad after
white tigers, yes, right.
And so they said, you know what, none of these cats that are so inbred serve any kind of conservation value. So we're going to call those generic tigers. And we're going to say that if you're breeding, inbreeding these animals, or you're not sticking to purebred tiger, Sumatran to Sumatran or Amora to Amora, if you're crossbreeding all of those cats, we're going to call those generic tigers, and we're not going to regulate that. And that just opened the floodgates for all of these backyard breeders to breed like freaking crazy, and they did. But now and we've been working since that time to close that loophole. And so finally they said in 2016, if it's a tiger, it's a tiger. It doesn't matter if it's a crossbred tiger, an inbred tiger, or even if you breed a tiger to a lion, it's still considered an endangered species.
Oh, okay. So how can we have the golden question, because this has been going on forever, and like so many other things with so many other species, people want to know what can be done to stop this. I personally am against, I don't even like regular zoos, let alone roadside zoos. I tell people all the time with the cats, the little domestic cats, they kill so many birds, and I say it's a cat, it's not a lion, it doesn't need to go outside. So, but a lot of people just don't have that mentality. So I personally would love to shut it all down. That might be a pipe dream. So what realistically can we do now? Is there someone to call? Is there something to do? What can like the masses do? I mean, you and I are more like activists, but what can the masses, reading this and hearing this, think I would like to do something, and then they hear about this, and then there's no final, here's who you call, here's who you write, here's what you do kind of thing. So what would be the kind of language that needs to pass to end this? Is there a legitimate federal agency that can be trusted to enforce this? Can you shed some light on that?
There is so much that can be done. And in fact, my husband and I, because we were just shocked at what Tiger King turned out to be, because that was not at all what they had pitched it to be to us. And so they said it was going to be called Stolen World, and it was going to be talking about how all of these horrible menageries exist and how it's causing the extinction of the tiger in the wild. And Tiger King was none of those things.
That's what I was hoping it was. Yeah, I was hoping it was going to be like that. Yeah.
that's why we worked with them for 5 years, because that's what they said they were doing. But at the end of it, my husband and I just looked at each other and said, well, that was a missed opportunity, because at the end of it, they could have said, if you want to save big cats in the wild and you want to end the abuse of big cats in captivity, go to bigcatact.com right now. And if people go to that URL, bigcatact.com, we make it so easy for them. If they're a US citizen and they type in their name and address, it will bring up an email that knows who their senators and representatives are, and it just preforms it. All you have to do is hit send. It'll do the same thing for who their representative and senators are, and we'll send them a tweet if you choose that option. There's 3 options you can choose, and I hope people choose all 3. And then the third one is the one that most people balk at, but it's the most important one because it has the most impact, and that is to actually call your member of Congress.
Right.
And so when they put in their name and address, it will, if you choose the option to call, it knows the number. It will dial the number for you, and it will dial your House representative first. It gives you a little script that says, please ask your boss to co-sponsor the Big Cat Public Safety Act. It tells you to stay on the line. You go and it'll just dial up your senator, and then it'll dial up your next senator, and you just go through the process 3 times and you've done it all. And right now we have 207 co-sponsors in the House.
Excellent.
I think we need like 218 to have a majority. And so we're getting really, really close there. And for the first time, we have something like 50 or close to 50 that are Republicans. And so that's a big hurdle, is getting the Republicans on the bill. And then in the Senate, for the first time ever, we've actually introduced with bipartisan support, and we have about 24 bipartisan co-sponsors in the Senate. So we're expecting in the next month or so to be able to get a hearing on the floor in the House. We got that hearing last December and we passed with a 2/3 majority, but we couldn't get the Senate to hear the bill before the session ran out. So we had to start all over in January.
Right, right.
This year we're so far ahead of the schedule, and it's a 2-year Congress. So we've got 1.5 years left to get this passed. But once this bill passes, what it does is it bans cub petting, which means all of that breeding stops, because the only reason 99% of the cubs out there are born is because people want to use them as pay-to-play bras. And if they can't use them for that, if it's illegal to pet a cub, then that stops all the breeding. The other thing that it does is it phases out private ownership. So people who have them can keep them. They just can't buy or breed anymore. And so once you turn off the faucet and you turn off the dumping grounds for the zoos to get rid of their animals by getting rid of them to dump them into public hands, this whole problem goes away, and not a minute too soon, because we are going to lose the tiger in the wild in the next 5 years if we don't stop all of this legal smokescreen that is hiding illegal activities.
Where would you say most of the tigers come from when they enter the US? I know that in Florida, we're like a hub for just about everything nefarious. But would you say most of them come through Florida and then go throughout the US, or do they come in California, or is it all just kind of a mishmash? Is there any particular hub where
They aren't
most
coming in alive at all. All of the tigers,
it's all being bred in the US?
yes,
Oh,
that's the problem. We're breeding them in the US when they serve no conservation value. They're never going to India or Africa, or any places where they could, serve any kind of conservation value. So there may be parts and derivatives that are coming in undetected into our borders from cats that are killed, but it would surprise me if there's a huge market for that, because there's thousands of these big cats in the US already that are disappearing, and probably in that black market for the local black market trade for their parts.
Right, they're actually more here than in the wild, and that's been true for a long time. And that is, I mean, that alone should just make people outraged. I wanted to ask you when I was, and I want to ask you about the new one, the conservation game, if we have time. But when I was watching Tiger King, I couldn't help but notice I was kind of waiting for someone to say 2 things. One, when they were walking down the road with the elephant, I noticed the bull hook. I don't know if anybody else noticed it, and I was waiting for them to say, folks, do you notice he's got a bull hook? But that didn't happen. And then I was also waiting for the narrator to say, folks, do you notice these cats would never let you get this close to them, let alone be this docile. They must be drugged. But I don't recall that ever being mentioned in it. Okay, because I was hoping people would view that and realize that they're not just like that because they're malnourished and probably, you know, beaten and all that kind of stuff, but they're literally drugged. That's a pretty common thing, right? I would think that they would have to be pretty drugged. So yeah, I was kind of hoping that it would be more like what you had mentioned, that it would talk about, you know, here's just a few in the wild, you know, and they're very under stress in China with the wine and the bones and everything. And then there's like a huge amount, you know, as pets in someone's backyard. And so, yeah, it was a missed opportunity. If we have time, did you want to talk about the conservation game?
Sure.
Okay, excellent.
During the period of time that we were working with the producers that ended up putting out Tiger King, we were working with a lot of producers. We were working with Michael Samstag, who had done a film, and all of this was over about a 5-year period. Michael Samstag worked on a product called Hidden Tiger, and Hidden Tiger is now being taken around to the festival circuit and some limited showings. And it's a really good documentary that talks about those wild tiger issues and how all of this captive stuff is actually harming tigers in the wild. It's a beautifully done film, lots of great footage of the cats in the wild, talking to conservation experts who tell you that none of this breeding in the US is serving any conservation value. All of the things we hoped would be in Tiger King are in Hidden Tiger. We were also working with Michael Weber, who was the producer of the conservation game. And the conservation game actually shows people how this whole crazy thing started in the US. You know, why is it that people are paying to have their pictures made with cubs? And why is it there are hundreds, if not thousands of cubs being bred? We were able to document over 200 cubs a year just by their stripe patterns are different. And so we went through like all of the social media posts and were able to identify at least 200 of these tigers, just tigers that were being bred for that purpose every year. And then they just up and disappear. And so the conservation game, the approach that they took was trying to tell people how that happened. And the way that happened was that back in the 80s and 90s, it was very common for people like Jack Hanna or Boone Smith or the Irwins, Grant Kemmerer, all these guys that were known as conservationists would show up on the Today Show and the Morning Show and the night shows and Johnny Carson and all of those, bringing cute little baby wild animals.
Little babies, I know. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
People saw that and they thought, oh, that's so cute. And the stations would get great ratings every time they did it because people would say, oh, that's so cute. And even when the show hosts were asking, where did this cat come from? They were told, oh, this came from some legitimate AZA accredited zoo. And well, where's its mother? Oh, it's at this wonderful zoo. And where's it going to go when it grows up? Oh, it's going to go to this other legitimate AZA accredited zoo. And so these talk show hosts and programs were all being lied to because those cats were not coming, for the most part, not coming from the AZA zoos, and they were not going back to AZA zoos or to legitimate sanctuaries. They were being bred by the Joe Exotics, Doc Antles, and that kind of people. And then they were going either back to those situations or out to pet homes or being used for birthday parties or just, you know, it documents all of these horrible things that they were able to prove on the different cats and how they ended up. One of the most shocking things, I think, was how many of the snow leopards had been discarded into a place that calls itself a sanctuary. But I feel like that place just enables the bad behavior of these people because she'll take in any animal, no questions asked. And that's what she says in the film, I never ask any questions. Well, if you give them a place to dump animals, they're going to keep breeding more animals. If you don't give them a place they could do that, then they've got to stop. So for years, I've tried to get her to stop doing that. But anyway, it shows how these animals end up. And so I think people will be shocked to learn how they were lied to by all of the people that we saw as the wildlife experts and our heroes and our icons when we were growing up. I'm really excited that it's won the awards that it has and that it's getting the kind of reviews that it's getting in the theaters, but we're finding it is very difficult, the producer tells us, to find somebody who would distribute it widely, like a Netflix or a Hulu or a Discovery. Or
I was just going to ask you, oh, really?
And the reason is because everybody was complicit in it. all of the television shows had all of those faux conservationists bring cute little cubs. And so now they can't very well go and show this that shows they were part of the problem and they caused this whole problem in the United States. So it's been an interesting thing to watch his struggle to get this out to the masses that need to see it, when the people who made this problem happen aren't willing to show that.
But Netflix and Hulu, they didn't exist back then, so they're not culpable at all.
They're dealing with so many of the same agencies, so same
Yeah.
production companies and all of those. So they're all so tightly knit that he just can't break through them.
Oh, that's a shame, because there's so many documentaries that really should be almost like mandatory, like, here, take a day off from work and this will tell you what's in your drinking water, and take a day off of work and this will tell you what's really going on, kind of thing. And it's just not. I mean, I'm like the queen of documentaries. I watch so many, but then I hear other people and I'm like, how do you not know this has been going on since the 80s? Because I'm giving away my age. And they're like, oh, I just found out about it, like the wild horse burrows and the sea turtles and the water, and I go down these issues and I'm like, it didn't just happen. But I see a lot of these pictures, even now, where someone is holding, chimpanzee or a cub, or that's what's, and you just can't keep track, and it can take a lot of time chasing down just one post. You try to find who that is and where they're from, and and you times it by like the millions of people doing that. Same with the selfies, because that kind of ties into that too. A lot of these animals, like the baby dolphin in Argentina, they die from being passed around for the selfies. So that's all this whole kind of crazy, almost perversion, kind of thing, where you've got these people wanting to have these big menageries. I think the guy in Miami was brought up, Mario something. He had like a whole private menagerie. I don't even know how that's legal, other than it's Florida. So you have that, and then that's what I say to people. I work with sea turtles. I'm like, it's Florida, and they're like, oh, got it. Okay, that explains it. But I mean, that shouldn't even be. And like, where are the neighbors? Is it possible to get like the neighbors riled up? Like, by the way, did you know your neighbor has like 5 tigers and an elephant? You might be concerned about that. I always wonder, is there anything we can do, on that end too? But it seems to be kind of like a cycle that sucks in so many people. So
there is something that everybody can do, and that is, whenever they see those posts online, instead of just shaking your head and saying, oh, that's too bad, call the people out on it. The only reason they're doing it is to be popular and to be liked. And if all they get is hate for doing it, they're going to stop doing it. As far as trying to raise awareness with the neighbors, I actually did that here in Florida, and it's one of the reasons why I've had a target on my head. But there was, I forget what it was. Oh, we were trying in 2009 to at least make the people in Florida liable if somebody got hurt by an exotic animal at their facility, and to have like a insurance bond that would cover that person's injuries. And so it was a nominal thing that the government was willing to do. It was a $10,000 bond, which isn't going to get you far if you get attacked by a tiger. But just getting that $10,000 bond passed, what I had to do was I contacted every single big cat owner in the state of Florida. I contacted all of their neighbors and said, we think that this is a really good bill. What do you think? And they were like, yeah, we think we should have that. So it worked for that. But unfortunately, in Florida, the Florida Wildlife Commission claims that they have statutory, constitutional authority over all exotic animals. And as a result, our state legislature can't pass any kind of a law unless it's in assistance to what the FWC wants to do, the Florida Wildlife Commission. I think they're wrong, and we've had a constitutional lawyer, actually a number of them, in fact, like the one, including some other people, that have said, no, they don't have that kind of authority, but we're trying to tackle this federal bill first, and then we'll go after the state of Florida on the way that they're not complying with the law, in our opinion. And that should make it so that the legislature can take action here. And if we had that ability in Florida, we could get some laws passed, because the citizens don't want this going on. It's only a handful of animal abusers that continue to do it.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I hope that definitely passes. I have my fingers crossed because it is it is Florida. I know how difficult that could be, but that could be another way to kind of, get around. If you can't go right at the people that have all these animals, if you can get, like I call it, circle the wagons, everyone around them, kind of against them, maybe we can just squeeze them out of existence. That would be great. That would be great.
I can't imagine Mario Tabro's neighbors like what's going on there. He's on less than 5 acres, and his census showed that he had something like 57 lions on less than 5 acres. And that was just lions. I mean, he's got tigers and jaguars and
Oh, he's got monkeys. He's got all kinds of, yeah, he's got all kinds of things. I mean, that can't be legal. But then I realize, Florida's, you know, yeah, FWC is a problem when it comes to that. That's really crazy. I just have one other quick question. When I first moved down here, so this would have been like 07, 08, I heard a rumor about some restaurant. They were selling lion meat in their tigers. It was somewhere over on the West Coast. I've since lost track of it. It was so many years ago, and I thought it came from some guy breeding lions for meat in Colorado. Does that sound familiar to you at all? Okay.
Lion meat has been legal, and I don't know if it's still legal, because I'm not sure whether or not the lion, now being a threatened species, may have eliminated that. Right. And that's only been in recent years that happened. But lion meat was a big problem, and there was a restaurant here close to Tampa that was serving lion meat that caught our attention the first time. And we were trying to press them to find out, where is this lion meat coming from? Because surely the food has to be inspected, and USDA says they don't inspect wild meats like that. So how is it that they're serving lion meat to customers if it's not being inspected by USDA? And everybody kept saying that the breeders were these USDA licensed facilities out west somewhere. So I got different things. It was California, it was Colorado, it was all over that western end of the United States. And then in Nevada, lion tacos became a big thing, and they said the same thing. We're getting our meat from this USDA facility and it's being inspected. And we're like, no, it's not. And then here locally, again in Tampa, just not too long ago, in the last 5 years or so, they were serving lion tacos again. And saying the same thing, that it's USDA inspected meat. And we're like, no, it's not.
Was this the same place that was selling the?
No, it was
a different place
or something.
Oh, okay.
There was a sting that was done, I think it might have been Operation Snowplow, where they arrested an awful lot of people who were involved in killing tigers and then marketing them as lion bones and lion meats. And it was illegal to do that to a tiger at the time, but it wasn't illegal to do it to a lion. Well, once you skin the animal, you can't tell if the teeth or the bones or the claws or the meat came from a lion or a tiger. And so that's how these endangered species were also ending up in that trade.
How do we stop that, or is that even stoppable?
It all comes down to stopping the cub petting, because that is the most lucrative thing that starts the whole thing rolling. And then the cast-offs from that end up in horrible situations, like being killed for their meat. Whereas if you just can't pet them to begin with, then they won't be bred to begin with.
Okay, and the link is on your website, bigcatrescue.org?
Bigcatact.com.
Bigcatact.com. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Carole, for your time. I really appreciate it. And keep up the good work. One of these days, I hope to get out there and see the place. And hopefully, in this session, we can pass something and try to get rid of all of this ridiculous cruelty. I mean, that's really mostly what it is. It's just barbaric cruelty, and coupled with sanity, and then greed, and then ego kind of mixed in. It really is like a toxic soup of just a horror show. It really is. I mean, the poor tigers, we barely have any left as it is, which is a shame.
We can't take action fast enough on this.
No. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Staci-lee.
Bye-bye.
Bye.